Hey everybody, welcome back to the IE427 garage. Today we are back working on Michael's car, and I wanted to catch all you guys up before I got too carried away. I did get home early from work today, and I decided that I was just going to dive right in, and so I didn't film a whole lot of the stuff. So this is going to be a lot of catch up here in the beginning, and then as I continue on throughout today and the evening, then I'll keep updating you. But we're trying to take care of all of the little nitpicky stuff that needs to be done on the car: the dash, the tunnel, the transmission tunnel, the what else did I do? The gauge sensor wires going to the engine. So I will turn the camera around and I'll catch you up on everything that we're working on today and what we plan on working on through the evening. Okay, let's start with some of the dash components. So I have the keys for the car, but I had the ignition switch out. I needed to measure that to know the exact size to cut in the dash for that hole. But we have a trim ring that we got from our buddy Mike Everson. This is going to go around the Russ Thompson turn signal stock. We have a billet horn button that is going to go in the dash. We have some directional indicators, so this is going to be left or right. We've got one of each, and I think we've got a high beam indicator light as well. This is the harness for that horn switch, and then we've got some cup holders. I'll get to those in a minute. I actually pulled this one out of the box, and it looks like it took a hit. It's bent on the corner, but I think I can massage that back into place. So one of the things that I normally do is I normally make these custom dashes myself. I don't order a blank dash from Factory 5. Reason being that sometimes it ends up just being more work this way. We had to cut out for the glove box anyways. No big deal. I would have had to cut out for that regardless. But I did have to trim the passenger side of the wing or the extension so that it would fit behind the body. This is let's call it a known issue, that the wing on this side is just too long. There's nowhere for it to tuck in, and so it needs about 1.5 inches to 2 inches taken out of it. So I took care of that. While I had it, the dash temporarily held in place in the car, I also trimmed this section because I just like it to follow the hoop of the chassis rather than sticking up just a little bit, because this will stick up just a little bit. It doesn't hurt anything. The body doesn't rest right on it, but I trimmed it anyways on both sides. So that side and that side I trimmed. The big issue here is that when you use the Russ Thompson turn signal stock, it's round. It's not oval shaped. And if you want a trim ring to fit around it, the only person that makes one is Mike Everson, and it's round. And so it won't cover, depending on where you end up with your round hole, which you do have to enlarge the top or the bottom, depending on where your dash lays out. You have to enlarge the hole so that the turn signal stock will fit through there. And ours ended up at the top, which isn't a big deal. But at the bottom, we were going to have about 1/4 inch gap where below the trim piece, there would be a gap. Now, we could have just covered that in fabric, but if anybody pushed on that, there wouldn't be anything backing it. So what I ended up doing is cutting a small piece in the front, and I'm just waiting for the epoxy to dry. It's tacky, but it's not dry. It'll be nice and hard by tomorrow, and then I'll pull the clamps off. But basically what we did is we just filled in a section of the bottom here so that we took up that space. So that's done. I have all the holes cut for the indicator lights, the right and the left, and the high beam. We've got the holes cut for the ignition switch. This is going to be the horn button. Over here is going to be our heater selector switch and fan. And so that's all done, and hopefully tomorrow we can get the padding put on the dash and then cover it with the fabric, which I do have. And that's over here. So this is a rather brave color choice. I'll say it again to Michael, because this is going to show any stains or dirt or anything else. But it's what he wants, and it's his car, so this is what we're going to be putting on the front of the dash. This will also go on the front of the glove box. We cut a panel. Where did I put that? We cut a panel for the front of the glove box door. So we have the door that's going to go in here, and then I made a false panel to go on the front of it that we're going to cover in that same fabric. And let me see if I can find that, and I'll get you guys back. All right, now I know I couldn't find it, and I'll show you why. So in the front of the glove box, what we did is we drilled 2 little holes. These are going to be for 1024 studs to mount through. And then we did on the panel that we're covering this with, we did cut a recess for the lock. So this portion of the black will be seen through the fabric. So our cover is actually going to bolt to the front of this, and it shouldn't interfere with anything. The hinges fold forward enough that it should be just fine. This is why I couldn't find it though. I epoxied in a couple of studs, so one there and one there, and then those come through the back, 1032, and then you can see the hole we cut for the lock set. Now this is going to be tough to cover because we only have this little tiny section in here that we need to wrap. So it's going to be a little bit fun doing that, but I think we can get that accomplished. The other thing that I've worked on today is I wanted to get all the dusty part done, because cutting that masonite on the jigsaw or in the bandsaw as we did can really be dusty in the shop. As a matter of fact, you can hear all the dust on the floor. So I did 2 things. I cut a tunnel top, so I cut a piece of 090 aluminum for the top of the tunnel, and this is going to have to still be cleaned up on the edges, but I did cut the hole for the shifter, and then I used that as a template to cut a piece of masonite for the top. And this piece of masonite will end up being covered with that same fabric that we're using for the dash in the front of the glove box. We still have to cut holes in that for cup holders, and I'm thinking that they're going to be closer towards the front because of where the shifter is, going to be. So right now the shifter's in first gear. I have a piece of aluminum temporarily clamped in place that shows the bottom of the dash, and so that tells me where I'm going to be able to get a cup into a cup holder in that spot, maneuver it in, and then still be out of the way of the shifter. So I've been working on that. I have it up on the lift right now because it's just easier to work using the lift as a workbench when I'm cutting these pieces, and so I can lower it down and raise it up. So basically what we did was we took a big cup like that and the cup holder, and then we placed it kind of like in here, and that was going to be too far back, as you can see where the shifter is, and so then I moved it forward to about here, and then we were still able to get a cup in there. You just have to kind of bring it in at an angle, and then boom, it'll go right in. So I'm thinking they're probably not going to use cups this size. It'll probably just be for water bottles, but I just wanted to make sure that if he wants to put a big cup in there that he'll still be able to get that in there and be able to shift in all the gears. Now the last thing that we're going to have to do after we figure out the cup holders is we have to figure out where our switches, we've got 2 switches right here, one on each side for the seat heaters. And so those will probably end up going right up in here. One on this side, one on that side. So as soon as we get the cup holders cut into place, then we'll figure out where these seat heater switches are going to go. And then I will drill and put nutserts in down the sides, both sides, for the tunnel top. And then that piece of masonite is actually going to go in with some automotive fasteners. Basically with those automotive fasteners, you drill a 1/4 inch hole in the material, both through this and through the aluminum behind. It gets pushed in here, and then this whole surface will be covered with foam and vinyl and wrapped. And then once the aluminum tunnel cover goes in place, then it allows this top piece, this masonite piece that's covered in the fabric, to be pulled off. So it'll just be a matter of removing the shifter boot, which is 4 screws, and then the tunnel top will come off, the vinyl coated one anyway. And then below that, it'll just be some countersunk screws into the aluminum tunnel top, and then that can come off. So if you ever need to get in the tunnel to do any wiring or anything like that, you can just get in there with the screws, and it's pretty simple to do. I've done it in just about every car that we've done. One last thing before I move on to probably tomorrow's video, or tomorrow's portion of this video, is I had an eventful afternoon cutting that aluminum. I've never had a zip disc shatter while I'm using it. I've dropped them and broken them and had this kind of stuff happen, but I've never had one just disintegrate while I was using it. And cutting that 090 aluminum, I had one shatter today, and so I just want to tell you guys, make sure you're wearing your safety glasses, and in this case I was wearing gloves too, so I didn't get any of the shrapnel on me, but just watch out for that stuff. And I watch all these guys on other YouTube channels, and I always see everybody pulling the guard off of their angle grinder, and I use these things a lot, both in what I do here in the shop and then out in the field as a contractor, and I always leave the guard on. I'm not going to lecture you guys on this, but that guard will save your life. So lecture over. So I will check back in with you guys tomorrow and continue this video. All right, here's where I'm going to start us off. We had a lot of challenges and a lot of frustration getting this dash wrapped, simply because of the color of the vinyl that was chosen. It's very unforgiving. So if you have just the smallest speck of dirt or oil, if your hands are sweaty, on your fingers and your hands, it transfers onto this vinyl, and then it has to immediately be cleaned, because if you don't clean it right away, my feeling is you're going to kind of work it into the surface, and it's going to be much more of a hassle to get it out later. But we did get all the gauges installed in the face of the dash. We got the horn button installed. We have the indicator lights installed. Now, there were some challenges with that, and I'll get to that in just a second. But we also got the glove box door installed. And the glove box door actually took us 2 tries. I wrapped it first with the same type of foam that we put on the dash for a backing. And what happened was the fabric wanted to bunch up so much in the corners here that I just couldn't get a clean wrap as I was wrapping them around. And so I had to scrap that idea. I had to pull all the foam off, sand down the piece of hardboard that we're using to make the face for the glove box door, and then basically start over. If you guys watch our social media pages, you'll see that I made the glove box door panel probably about a week or so ago, but it's mounted with just a couple of machine screws that go through the face of the 1/4 inch hardboard, and then are epoxied in to that hardboard, and then the nuts just go through the actual surface of the glove box. This glove box itself was a huge challenge. The door does not want to fit properly, and that actually has nothing to do with the fact that we made the box shallower. I had to shave down the bottom portion of the glove box door just to get it to open this far, because with the hinges adjusted so that the glove box door will close and latch properly, I couldn't get it to open past about this point right here because it was binding up so bad. So relieving all of that material right at the back of the door on the bottom allows the door now to open at least this far. So that part of it's done, and we've got that pretty much all squared away. It really looks nice from the front. But if anyone ever asks me to cover a dash in this color again, I'm just going to say no. The indicators themselves are a metric, so they're a 14 millimeter hole, which isn't a problem. The problem is that the outside ring of the indicator itself is only 15 millimeters, and so by the time you make the hole in the vinyl and then insert the indicator light, the fabric just pops around the outside because there's not enough to hold it in. So after investigating dash indicator trim screws, there is no such thing, and I stumbled upon banjo bolt washers, sealing washers as they're called, or crush washers, and I found that they're made in both copper and aluminum, but the ones that I had here in the shop were not going to be the right size. So I actually went to one of the local hardware stores to us, McFadden, and I found some. And these are 14 by 20. So the inside diameter is a 14 millimeter. The outside diameter is a 20 millimeter. And it allows the button to grab enough of the fabric as it goes in to hold everything in really tight. And I think they came out nice for what they are and what we had to do to get them in there. I think they came out really nice. Again, the horn button's in. We still have a trim ring that we got from our buddy Mike Everson over here that we will be putting on for the area around the Russ Thompson turn signal switch. Let's see if I can get this open. So this will go on here like that, and then the steering shaft will come through there, and there's 3 screws that fasten that, and then we're going to start wiring this. So follow along as I turn this thing over and start wiring it. One word of warning: put something down that is going to enable you to not scratch the glass on the gauges as you're doing this. And then we're going to pull out the key so this thing sits a little flatter on the surface, and the towel is going to protect us from doing any damage to any of the gauges or the indicator lights as we start wiring this thing together. So I wanted to stop here for a second and show all of you, if you're working on any of the Factory 5 Roadsters, so the Mark 1s through the Mark 4s, if you're putting the dash in according to the assembly manual, you're going to find that once you put the screws to secure the dash into the hoop and the body goes on, you can't get to those screws. So what we've done on every build that we've done, minus one, is we've put these L brackets. Basically in this case we bought some inch by inch 90-degree aluminum angle. In the past we've used 3/4. Well, it works just fine. This is just some scrap that I had from another project, and so I thought, it'd be nice just to have a little bit more depth, and so we went ahead and put that in. Now don't worry that it hangs over the back, okay, because it's going to hang over the back a little bit, but it's not going to be seen. And what you want to do is you want to check when you put your dash all together that these brackets will not interfere with the actual dash pad, because in some instances, especially if you're using the stock location for the Factory 5 padded dash or the pre-punched out aluminum dash, you may find that over on the driver's side where some of the gauges go, it's really tight right in here. And if you're doing the indicator lights like we're doing here, you may find that these indicator lights come really close as well. So you want to make sure that wherever you're putting those pieces of angle bracket, that you have enough room on the back of the dash so that they'll sit properly. So with all that said, what we've done on this one is we put them at the far end of the passenger side so they don't interfere with the glove box. So the glove box is basically from here over. We've put one in the center. That's the center of the dash hoop. And then we've put one over on the driver's side in about the same position that we did on the passenger side. So it's right here near the edge. Now, one thing I will caution you about is you don't want to put this right on the edge, because there's a weld under here, and that weld is going to interfere with this angle piece sitting perfectly flat on the bottom. So if you bring it in just a little bit and miss that weld, then you can get this to line up really flush. And then you're going to assemble this or mount this to the chassis the same way you mount all the aluminum panels. You're going to drill it. In this case, I've used 3/16 rivets. So I drill it with a 3/16 inch bit. We put some silicone adhesive behind it, and then we went ahead and we pop riveted it with 2 rivets on each of the brackets. And what that's going to allow you to do now is when you put your dash in at whatever height that ends up at, you're going to be able to lower your screws down on that dash pad so that when the body comes over, you can still get to those screws. And that's critical, because if you can't get to those mounting screws, you can pull the steering wheel off and everything else, but you are not getting that dash out without those screws out. You'd be forced to, in one case where we had a car that we had to redo the dash, we actually had to strip all the padding off of the dash, and then we had to cut the screw heads with like a multi-tool and a metal cutting blade on the end of that. So it gets real hairy when you're trying to do that, and there's no way you could do it with the vinyl padding on the dash. So just keep that in mind when you start putting your dash together, that you're going to have to figure out something to lower these down. Now, on the one instance where we didn't do the angle brackets, that's actually on Slytherin over there. And then what we did on that is we actually affixed these brackets to the back of the dash, and then we ran some machine screws down through the top of the hoop. We epoxied those machine screws in, and there are nuts that go on the bottom so that you can put the dash in without any visible fasteners on the front. But it just, for the effort that it takes to do it that way versus on a padded dash with black trim screws that you really don't see anyways, it's really not worth the effort. So, but I'll leave that up to you guys. If you're building your car and you want to put the hidden fasteners in, you know, that they look nice. You know, not seeing the fasteners looks nice. But in this case, we're just going to be doing 3 screws across the front. 1, 2, 3. And then on these, rather than the black trim screws, I think we're going to go with some polished stainless screws, and then the trim washers. So those will be nice. They'll blend right in with the chrome around the outside of the gauges. All right, we are finishing up the wiring on the back of the dash, and as much as that looks like a rat's nest, we've done them in the quote-unquote neat way before, and this is not a bashing of Speedhut gauges, but a friend and I were having a conversation about the gauges, the Speedhut gauges, and we were talking about the warranty and how great they are at warranty work. And the friend said to me, well, that's because they have to be. The Speedhut gauges don't have a great track record of reliability. The clocks that they provide in their kits usually give out first. If you remember on the Texas car, we those that follow us on social media know that we changed out 2 gauges before the car ever left the shop. The last one, I think, being the oil pressure gauge. I think it was the oil pressure gauge both times, believe it or not. Regardless, so what I've done is I've gotten to the point now where I want to make sure that if I have to replace one of these gauges, it's going to be relatively easy to do. And so what I do on each of the gauges is I group the 3 wires or the sets of wires that are coming off of each gauge. So this is oil pressure. I've got the sensor wires, which are the yellows. I've got the black wires, which are some of the dash lights. And then I've got the red, black, and white wire that are lights and gauge power, all grouped together. And then all 3 plugs come together at this one point. This is the way I'm going to leave everything from here to the gauge. So if I have to replace this gauge, it'll be a matter of reaching in from the bottom of the dash, unscrewing the lock nut on the back, pulling the gauge forward, pulling the 3 clips, and then getting the ring out, and then sending the gauge in to have it fixed. I no longer want to have to pull the entire dash off to replace a single gauge. So I'm doing that on every gauge here. So if you look, here's the fuel level gauge right next to it. Then next to that is the volt gauge. We've got the speedometer down here. Same thing. We've got the wires grouped together. The tachometer over here. The water temperature gauge. And then the oil temperature gauge right here. So all of them are grouped together. Everything on this side of the harness will get tie wrapped nice and neat together. But as far as this stuff right here, I am not going to route this and, selectively route the wires so that it's all like super neat anymore, because it's just not worth the aggravation of having to come back here later and remove the entire dash to change out one gauge. And again, I'm not bashing Speedhut. I love their gauges. What they do with their gauges is awesome, because when you think about the speedometers and what we had to do before to get a reverse rotation speedometer for one of these things, there was a reversing gear and it was a mechanical gauge. I'm on my 3rd gauge, mechanical gauge for Slytherin over there, because that reverser, that gear reverser, if it's not lubricated, it'll lock up, and then it binds up the gauge and it binds up the speedometer cable. It's a pain in the neck. So I love Speedhut gauges, and I love the way they look, and I love the way they work. I just hope that as time goes on, they get a better track record for reliability, because I really like their gauges. So with that, I am going to move on, and I think I've got one more. I'm short one connector on these connectors that I believe that may have to be serviced later on. So this is like the left turn indicator lamp. I want to make sure I got a spade connector on here so that we can remove this if we have to. And so all of the other ones you can see, here's the one for the right, and I've got the one for the high beam selector or the high beam lamp right here. So I want to make sure that those are removable. So I'm short one male spade connector for this wire. And then once I get that, I'll pick those up tomorrow. And then hopefully I'll have the wires dressed enough that I can put the dash into the car and give you guys a better idea of what's going to look like when it's mounted in the car. All right, how about that? We have a dash installed in the car now. Now you get a better idea of what I was talking about with these mounting screws. So imagine you've got this screw mounted way up here. First, the way the hoop is shaped versus the way the top of the dash is shaped, you need to hold this down a little bit so that you don't run out of dash on this end and have it too low or too high and hold the body up. So by moving the screw down with those little brackets, the L brackets that we put on the back, you're able to get the screw down far enough that you're probably going to clear the body. The body's going to hang down about 3/4 of an inch right here, and then over here on the corners as well. So I didn't put these down as far as I could get them, but I wanted to make sure they were far enough down past the 3/4 inch tube that they weren't going to cause any issue. They're loosely put in here now. You can hear the washers is still loose. I don't want to put any tension on those because I may have to pull the screws out as time goes on here. I might have to pull the dash out again. I'm hoping not, but you just never know. And then another consideration if you're going to lay out your own dash is to make sure that your gauges aren't going to interfere with that 3/4 inch hoop on the top either. So make sure your gauges are low enough, your indicator lights are low enough so that hoop isn't going to be in the way, and then not only miss the hoop, but then when the body comes over the top, it's not going to interfere with that either. So all in all, I think this project came out really nice considering all of the challenges that we had with the glove box, the heater core, the dash material. We still have the gauge sensor wires to take care of. I just started on those, but I think I'm just going to hold off, not hold off, but that's probably going to be in another video, the next video, if at all. It's pretty simple. I mean, basically all we're doing is we're taking the pigtail leads that snap into the sensors, stripping and then splicing those into the wires that we have here. Our big difference is we had to route one of the ground wires back this way because our oil temp sensor is actually going to be on the back of the head. We don't have a port in the pan at the bottom. I'm not pulling the pan to drill it and to put a bung in. So this is where the old oil temp sensor was. That's where the new one's going. And then we have the coolant temperature sensor, which we've got up here in the coolant tube, and we've got the oil pressure sensor that's going to go down where it went in the last iteration of this car. So this is looking pretty good. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. We'll get the Russ Thompson turn signal switch all laid out. That's one of the reasons that I'm not calling the dash completely done, because I'm still going to have to pull the mounting screw off on this side to sneak the wires past, because there is a connector on the end of that now that's pretty good sized, and so we're going to have to sneak that in there. And then the steering wheel is going to have to go on at some point too. As it stands right now, we are finished with the dash. There's just a couple little things. The ignition switch, the heater selector switch over there, and the Russ Thompson turn signal switch, and we're done. So I think I'm going to close the video out here, and yeah. And with that, I think we're going to close this video out for today. We're done with the dash. So we're going to be moving on to other things. We've got still a little bit of electrical to take care of. We've got the radiator and the cooling system to finish up. And then hopefully we'll be starting this thing back up. So stay tuned for that. I want to remind everybody, you get to see me in my work shirt today. The new design IE427 t-shirts are available. You can contact us through the link on the YouTube, our main page. And that email address is ie427garage@gmail.com. And we will get back to you with payment instructions, and we'll get those shirts shipped out to you. So again, thank you guys all for watching. We appreciate the views. Like, share, subscribe, do all that kind of good stuff. And we will see you all next time. Have a great day.